11 years ago this week, on May 1st, 2003, Miss Elizabeth passed away. Her real name was Elizabeth Hewlett, 42 years old. The cause of death was acute toxicity from mixing vodka and pain pills that she had been taking for a bad back. They ruled it an accidental overdose. She started choking, I guess, while she was eating. Lex Luger, who was her live-in boyfriend at the time, called 911 because he noticed she wasn't breathing. She was turning purple. And so he called 911. Cops ended up arresting Luger on felony drug possession charges. They searched his house. They found over 1,000 illegal pills, anabolic steroids, testosterone, bunch of other drugs. Luger pleaded guilty to possession. First-time offender, so he only got probation and had to submit to drug tests to prove that he was no longer taking steroids. He and Elizabeth had been together going back to the dying days of WCW. There was a domestic dispute between the two less than a month before her death, where Luger allegedly hit her, gave her 2 bruised eyes and a cut lip. So, a real winner, this guy. Her death was really sad. I mean, I, like a lot of you guys, grew up on Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth when I was a kid. And I don't know that Macho Man would have been as successful as he was without her. He would have been okay, but she put that whole act over the top. She really did. She was as important a part of that act as anything else. And she didn't do much, but she didn't have to do much. She would come out there. She knew how to play her character perfectly. She was this, perfect picture of class. She would come out wearing these great, classy outfits, and she would be, she was kind of timid. And she would stand by her man, and she would wave to the fans, and she was perfect. She was just perfect in that role. And I think it was a big part of why Macho Man ended up getting over as a babyface. It had a lot to do with people loving Liz. Even when Macho was a heel, people didn't hate Elizabeth. She didn't do anything evil or nefarious or interfere and low blow people or trip them or any of that kind of BS. She was who she was. She would, Macho kind of abused her. I say abused, but, he would talk down to her and stuff like that. That was all part of his character. And you felt bad for her. You felt sympathy for her. It was impossible to hate her even when Macho Man was a heel. And, there were stories that Elizabeth was actually called what they call a ring rat back in the day, which is basically a woman who hangs around the wrestlers looking to have sex with them. I don't know how accurate that is. There's been stories like that for a long time that's kind of how she ended up with Randy. And also that she used to be a lot heavier than we all remember her being. She lost a bunch of weight, and that's why she looked the way that she did. But apparently before that, she had been, how heavier, I don't know. I've never seen a picture, so I have no way of knowing. But she got involved with Randy Savage, working for his dad's promotion at the time, ICW. And they got married in 84. Breaking kayfabe here. They didn't actually get married at SummerSlam in 91. They were married a long time before that. She did commentary for ICW for a while, and then came over when Randy came to WWE in 85. And they did that great angle where all the managers were vying for the services of Randy Savage. There's no better way to try to get somebody over as being a big deal than having all the managers go crazy and saying, I want this guy. And they're all kind of hustling each other and bidding against each other. And it made Savage's debut into a really big deal. And then finally, when it comes time for D-Day, who'd he pick as his manager? As it turned out, it was none of the usual suspects. It wasn't Slick. It wasn't Fred Blassie. It wasn't Bobby Heenan, Jimmy Hart. He introduced Elizabeth. That was her debut, and she was stunning when she walked out there. There were also stories that it was her idea. The whole genesis of the Mega Powers angle, which to me is one of the best in the history of that company, was supposedly an idea that originated with Elizabeth. I don't know how involved in that whole process she was. Storyline-wise, she was a big part of it. She was the reason they broke up. But that whole Mega Powers angle, from the moment it started, when they became allies, to the moment they broke up on that main event show, when Savage, bailed on Hogan during the tag match and attacked him backstage, that angle was so great. It was just such great stuff. And Elizabeth was a huge part of that. And apparently behind the scenes, she may have been a big part of that as well. They did the reunion of WrestleMania 7 when Savage and Liz reunited, and, I'm not afraid to admit that, I go back and watch that angle, and those damn ninja chopping onions get to me sometimes. I'm man enough to admit it. That was awesome stuff. And we had some people actually recently on our Facebook group posting pictures of some of the fans that they showed in the audience from WrestleMania 7 when they reunited. Very emotional. You'd expect a lot of women to get all teary-eyed and stuff like that, and they did. And Bobby Heenan was awesome on commentary. They would show these women crying in the crowd. It was supposed to be a feel-good moment. And they show them, and Heenan's on commentary just going, oh, maybe her shoes are too tight, you know? Shouldn't have had the chili dog with onions. And then they showed this one kid, a guy. I don't know what the fuck this guy was wearing. I guess maybe like his own homemade Macho Man hat, which is probably why he looks so ridiculous. The actual Macho Man hat looked ridiculous. Imagine a homemade version. But he's like crying and smiling, and it was just the most hilarious thing. So they did that whole thing, the wedding at SummerSlam 91, the whole thing with Flair heading into WrestleMania in 92, she was mine before she was yours. Even when the match was over, you know, and Savage won the belt, and Flair grabbed Elizabeth, and he's like, you know, what about me? And he kisses her, he forces himself on her. And Liz just starts like wildly slapping the crap out of Flair. Very rare that you saw Elizabeth get physical in WWE. It did happen sometimes, the stuff with Sherry and all that, but that was a great angle as well that year. You know, and as was the case with a lot of people who went from WWE to WCW, they never really did anything with her. Nothing memorable anyway. She was back with Randy for a bit. I think she may have turned on him again. She joined the NWO. She never felt special. And that was the case with a lot of people when they went, especially not necessarily even the main event people, but maybe mid-card type people. When they came over to WCW, they took the big fat paycheck to come over because they had a name at one point, so they gave them a contract. They never meant the damn thing. It was never, ever a situation where they could recapture that magic. It just never happened, and you know, it was the same thing with her. But she will go down, I think, as one of the more influential figures and influential managers. You think of her a little bit differently. She wasn't out there taking bumps. She wasn't out there cheating and that kind of stuff, but she played her role perfectly, and she served a very important role, I think, in the career of Randy Savage. And I don't think that should be forgotten. And all this talk about how Macho Man deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and every single year there's this big movement to get Macho Man inducted, and will he ever be inducted? I hope and think he will be at some point, but we've got to keep Elizabeth in that conversation as well. And I would even advocate that when that day comes that Macho Man is inducted into the Hall of Fame, that same year, that same class, maybe even as a package deal, it should be the Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth together going into the Hall of Fame.